Hi there and welcome to another weekly update. As you can see, I'm outside. I've been working all morning doing some stuff in the garden. Spring has kind of definitely sprung here in UK East, so it just means there's lots of things to do outside, and I was worried I was running out of time and wouldn't get a chance to record this, so I thought I'd just do it now. So apologies, I haven't got changed. I'm still kind of covered in bits of nature, but it's nice to get out and do some stuff like this whilst the weather's good. Interesting tangent actually. Nothing to do with Skype for Business, but or Teams or development or anything really. But if you're like me and you like listening to podcasts, I tend to listen to them whilst I'm doing kind of odd jobs and stuff around the house. And I always had an issue like doing outside stuff where you've got like tools or equipment that's noisy. You end up with the headphones, you end up like cranking the volume right up, or power tools where you need to wear kind of ear protective, big sort of muffly things to protect your ears. I ended up trying to wear like in-ear like Bluetooth headphones underneath, and that would get really uncomfortable. So I was looking around, and what I was really looking for were like Bluetooth enabled like ear defenders, and I couldn't find any. But what I found with it, and this is not like supposed to be an ad read, but I just thought I'd tell you anyway. So I found these, which are like ear defenders, but they've got a like 3.5mm headphone jack in the end. They're made by Honeywell. They're called Howard Light. I don't know who that is, but anyway, they're certified. They're like EN352, which is what we use in Europe. They're also certified to some sort of Australian standard apparently. So they're good on your ears, but they also take 3.5mm in. And then the other thing I found was this is made by Teotronics, who make a ton of like Bluetooth enabled things. I think I've got one of their like Bluetooth shower speakers in the shower. This tiny little thing here is a Bluetooth receiver out to 3.5. So this goes in here. I wear this on my head, and it's perfect. It's really good. I've been using it all morning with like a ton of different tools, and it's been great. So that was my just a bit of information. Thought you might find it useful. Anyway, let's talk about what's happening this week in the world of Skype for Business and Teams and communication and all the rest of it. And the first thing I want to point out is a really interesting blog post put out by the Microsoft Teams team about the kind of the landscape and the changing landscape, the way we work as a team, and the way collaboration happens and stuff like that. I guess the first thing, this is it's a survey commissioned by Microsoft, so you've got to kind of read into that. But it's very interesting. It's fairly agnostic. It's not like we did a survey and it shows we're the best. It's nothing like that. It's more about talking about the different people that like how that demographic of how people work is broken up. Really interesting. Some really interesting data here about different groups of people. So I'm like, what I mean by like baby boomers, Gen X's, millennials, Gen Z's, like how many, like for each of those bandings, like how much email do they do versus how much mobile phone calls do they do versus how many video conferencing do they do. So really interesting data set. The other really cool thing for me, we're looking through this data set, Microsoft has done a really good job of presenting some really good graphs, but on each of the graphs, all the graphs are embedded Power BI. And what that means is, and it's awesome, what that means is these graphs are interactive. You can click on them, you can filter them, you can right click and go show the data and see the actual data that made up the graph. They're all very, very open about where the data comes from. And so if you're looking at a particular data set and thinking, well, actually, it would be interesting to see that slightly differently filtered, like dig into the data because it's all in Power BI. You can right click show the data, you're in the report. It's really very, very cool. And there's like a ton of statistics in here, so that's really interesting statistics. Here's like just one random one. 42% of US workers spend at least 60% of their time working remotely. Who'd have thought? By 2027, it's expected that the majority of US workers will freelance. Like the majority, that's incredible. Really interesting sets of data that are worth digging through to try and kind of understand. The one that stood out for me really is how different groups of people collaborate differently. And specifically when you're looking at collaboration, you're looking at video conferencing and co-authoring services. That's much more prevalent between like the later generation, so your Gen Zs and your millennials. Email usage is interesting to look at. It dies off, really quite a lot as you go away from the baby boomer age. So yeah, really interesting sets of data that are definitely, they're worth digging into and worth understanding, especially if you're kind of working in this area and you're building products around this area. It will only benefit you to understand, how, like what the likely groups of people that will be using your product, what they're likely to be, what age they're likely to be, the type of work they're likely to do, and the types of things they like doing versus the types of things they don't like doing. Okay, what next? So there's kind of a small announcement in the week around Skype room systems. So there was a firmware update there. It's an automatic upgrade, and I wasn't going to talk about it really. The only thing that I thought was interesting was that in the release notes, which were quite small, one of the line items was improvements to prepare for future operating system updates. Now I have no idea what that means. I have no kind of inside knowledge about what this means, but I think it's interesting when you look at the Teams world. Part of the work that's been going on at the moment is bringing features to Teams so that there is that kind of feature parity with Skype for Business. You'll be able to do all the same things. Skype Room Systems is kind of an important part of the whole ecosystem there. So bringing Teams functionality to Skype Room Systems would be really good. Either automatically or as some kind of I don't know, maybe they work together, maybe you have one or the other. I've no idea. I've no idea even if that's what this line item is about. I just thought it was interesting. So that's that. Oh, this is good as well. So I can't remember if I've talked about this before, but I came across it in the week, and it was a bit of a lifesaver, and that's the .NET API browser. So there's a web page you can go to, and it's a tree you can walk through the .NET API. It's an API for walking through .NET. What I mean is, you start at system dot or whatever, and you can go down, and you can just walk through the tree, see all the properties, all the methods, all the classes. It's useful just for understanding. Sometimes it helps to see a particular command if you're coming new into something. So in my case, I'm working on something I hope to be able to talk about in a couple of weeks. It should be an exciting new kind of tool for Microsoft Teams, but as part of what I was doing, I kind of needed to do something and I hadn't done it before, so I do what everyone else does. I went on Stack Overflow, googled around a bit. I was like, oh, you need to use this method. It's like, okay, and it was like 90% of what I needed, but being able to go to the API browser and see that method in the context of all the other methods and properties surrounding it in the class gives you a much richer understanding of what that method is supposed to do and whether or not it's the right one to do. And in my case, it was actually better to go and use a slightly different one that I wouldn't have known about had I not been able to see it there in the browser. So that's for developers, it's worth remembering that you can do that stuff. It's worth remembering that stuff's around. And the only other thing I want to talk about is OneNote for Windows 10. To become the default Windows version later this year. Now, this is nothing to do with dev or anything like that, but I think it's interesting that we are seeing applications from the Office suite become, at least one of those applications is becoming the default, and I think the only type of application. You won't be able to do OneNote on desktop. It's the Windows 10 app, it's the progressive web app style, and so I think that's really interesting that is coming to Office. I think I've talked about this before in the context of Teams and the context of Outlook. I hadn't even thought about OneNote. OneNote makes so much sense. It's relatively more simple. It's probably slightly newer code base as well, so I imagine they looked at the whole stack of them and went, which one's easiest, that we can get functionality and parity quickest, let's do this one. So interesting to watch. All right, I'm going to try and keep this under 10 minutes, so have a great week, whatever it is you're doing. I'm going to get back out and carry on doing this gardening stuff, try not to cut funny fingers, and have a great weekend, and speak to you next week.